Keanu Reeves enters a high-end car dealership expecting a simple conversation about a vintage model, only to be met with shocking hostility and a violent confrontation. Yet this calm and unassuming actor's next move leaves everyone speechless, revealing a truth no one saw coming. But before we dive in, leave a comment and let us know where you are watching from today. And if this story speaks to you, hit that subscribe button for more amazing stories. It was a bright morning in Los Angeles, the sun casting a golden light on the sleek facades of high-end storefronts. The dealership Keanu chose was known citywide for its pristine collection of exotic cars, vehicles so rare and expensive that even a glance seemed exclusive. The air smelled of fresh leather and polished chrome as the automatic doors whooshed open, greeting Keanu with a blast of crisp, air-conditioned coolness. His attire was simple, a well-worn black jacket, faded jeans, and scuffed boots. He didn't wear any flashy accessories. No large entourage followed him. To the dealership's staff, he appeared to be just another curious passerby, perhaps someone wanting to sneak a photo with the famous cars. He offered a kind smile to a young receptionist, but she barely acknowledged him, occupied with her phone. Undeterred, Keanu stepped into the main showroom. High-gloss floors reflected the silhouettes of polished supercars arranged in gleaming rows. The vehicles ranged from sleek, modern convertibles to the rarest vintage machines, each sporting a price tag large enough to make most people's eyes water. Keanu moved calmly through them, pausing occasionally to admire a particular model and read its spec sheet. All the while, a few curious onlookers gazed at him, some recognizing his face but unsure why he was there alone. He finally stopped in front of a cobalt blue vintage sports car. Its classic line spoke to him, reminiscent of an older Hollywood, a time when cars were works of art as much as modes of transport. The sticker price was staggering, but Keanu's attention was on the car's timeless beauty. He stepped closer, gently running his hand over the fender, as if feeling the car's story. In the distance, a salesman peeked over his shoulder and did a quick double take. For a moment, the man seemed to register that this was indeed Keanu Reeves. But just as he took a step to approach, a stern voice barked from the manager's office. "Don't waste your time on looky-loos." The salesman hesitated, then looked away, pretending not to notice Keanu at all. Keanu didn't mind the initial brush-off. He'd never demanded red carpet treatment and was used to blending in. He continued to study the car's interior, noticing the carefully restored leather seats and the vintage steering wheel. He could almost picture driving it along the Pacific Coast Highway, the sun setting over the water. Moments later, an older man in an impeccable suit marched out of the manager's office. His posture was rigid, shoulders set as though he carried the weight of the entire dealership's reputation on them. Mr. Langston, the general manager, had a reputation for brokering million-dollar deals with the city's elite. His gaze landed on Keanu like a hawk eyeing a trespasser. "Good morning," Keanu said politely, turning around. "I was hoping to get more information about this car." Langston sized him up from the worn boots to the casual jacket. He didn't return the greeting. "This car," he said, placing exaggerated emphasis on each syllable, "isn't just some used auto. It's a collector's item. Are you quite sure you know what you're asking about?" Keanu smiled gently. "Yes, I'm quite sure," he replied. "Would you mind telling me more about its history?" Langston paused, his lips curling into a condescending grin. "Sir, do you have any idea what kind of clientele we serve here?" He waved an arm toward the row of gleaming exotics. "These machines are for people who understand their true value, people of a certain standing." A handful of staff members, alerted by the tension, started drifting closer. They eyed Keanu warily. Some recognized him and exchanged uncertain looks. Others simply saw a casual stranger daring to step into a realm of high-end luxury. Keanu kept his composure, letting Langston's words hang in the air. He was used to meeting all kinds of people, some friendly, some not, but the open hostility from this manager was unsettling. "I understand what I'm looking at," Keanu answered, calm but firm. "If you can't help me, maybe someone else can." A flicker of anger crossed Langston's face. "I'm the manager here," he snapped, "and I decide who gets help." He then looked around as if for confirmation. Several employees stood silent, unwilling to cross their intimidating boss. Keanu glanced again at the cobalt blue vintage car. In his mind, it still shone with all the promise he'd hoped for. But the growing hostility around him felt like a dark cloud in the sunny LA morning. He took a quiet breath, bracing himself. He had no idea just how hostile the next minutes would become. The uneasy silence tightened in the sprawling showroom like a cord drawn too taut. Keanu maintained his calm, though he sensed the atmosphere shifting from simple unfriendliness to outright confrontation. Mr. Langston stepped closer, eyes narrowing as though Keanu were trespassing on forbidden ground. A few bystanders hovered near the edges of the room, phones clutched in their hands, uncertain whether to record. One or two recognized Keanu for who he was, a world-renowned actor loved for his humility. Still, none dared to intervene, presumably fearful of Langston's wrath or uncertain if they were interpreting the scene correctly. Keanu gently shut the car door he'd been examining and turned toward the manager. "Look," he began, voice level, "I'm here to ask some questions about this vintage model. If you're uncomfortable talking to me, that's fine, but there's no need for hostility." Langston's face twitched with contempt. "Hostility? Son, you're lucky I even bothered to come out here. We've got real clients to attend to, the kind who wear proper suits and don't question the prices of cars they clearly can't afford." A younger salesperson, Eva, stepped forward, clearing her throat timidly. "Mr. Langston, I can assist this gentleman." Langston wheeled around, cutting her off with a sharp gesture. "Did I give you permission to speak, Eva?" he barked. She stepped back, swallowing her protest. Keanu's gaze flicked to her sympathetically, but she lowered her eyes, afraid of making more trouble. The tension mounted. Keanu decided to give it one more shot, speaking softly. "I don't want to cause a scene," he said. "I just need a little information about the car. That's all." The manager's gaze burned with suspicion. "Oh, you're causing a scene, all right," he spat. "Men like you come in off the streets thinking you can just, what? Talk your way into a test drive of a vehicle that costs more than an entire condo complex? I've seen your type before. Big talk, empty pockets." Keanu's patience wore thin, yet he tried to keep his voice calm. "It's unfortunate you judge people so quickly." Langston let out a cold laugh. "And I'll judge however I please," he said, stepping into Keanu's space with a confrontational stance. The manager's tone rose, attracting more onlookers. "You think because you've got some nerve you can just walk in here and browse?" By now, a small circle had formed around them. A few staff members watched with wide eyes torn between loyalty to their boss and the undeniable sense that he was going too far. The shining cars stood like silent witnesses. Then, without warning, Langston lunged forward, shoving Keanu backward. The move was sudden enough that Keanu stumbled, his back colliding with the side mirror of a nearby luxury coupe. A shocked gasp rippled through the crowd. Keanu straightened, eyes reflecting both surprise and a hint of sadness. He rubbed his shoulder, trying to stay composed. "There's no need for violence," he said quietly. "I'm not here to fight." But Langston wasn't finished. Maybe it was the embarrassment of having an audience, or the fact that Keanu wasn't reacting with fear. The manager's face reddened, and he swung a quick jab, striking Keanu in the chest. The blow wasn't well aimed, but it sent him reeling a step. Another shocked murmur rippled among the staff. At this, Eva stepped forward again, alarmed. "Mr. Langston, please, this isn't—" She was silenced by a sharp look from the manager. Keanu, stunned but still determined to avoid escalating the conflict, raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm not going to fight you," he repeated steadily. "Just let me go and I'll—" But Langston, perhaps sensing his dominance threatened, delivered a swift kick to Keanu's leg. This time, Keanu lost his balance. He dropped to one knee, wincing. A high-end sports car behind him rattled as he bumped into it, the alarm chirping briefly. Cries of dismay rose from a few onlookers. One onlooker quickly reached for his phone and started recording. Another staff member gasped, turning away as if she couldn't bear to witness this brutality. Meanwhile, Langston stood over Keanu, chest heaving, fists clenched. Through labored breath, Keanu looked up, an unspoken question in his eyes. Why? But he didn't retaliate. He never raised a hand, never shouted. His calm in the face of violence only seemed to further ignite Langston's rage. "You want me to call the cops on you?" the manager growled, voice trembling with anger. He delivered another shove, forcing Keanu to scramble up off the showroom floor. Get out! You're done here! Don't ever come back! Keanu rose unsteadily, eyes full of quiet resolve. A small bruise had begun forming on his cheek. Still, he spoke in a measured tone. I don't know what's driving you to do this, but you've made your point. I'm leaving. Limiting his limp as best he could, Keanu walked stiffly through the circle of onlookers. Some parted to let him pass, visibly shaken. Others stared in disbelief, phones held uncertainly at their sides. In the background, the faint hum of the dealership's air conditioning hummed on, as though indifferent to the violence that had just unfolded. Outside, the Los Angeles sun felt both comforting and jarring as Keanu stepped onto the sidewalk. He drew in a deep breath, trying to steady the adrenaline coursing through him. He glanced at the dealership's glass doors one more time, an unmistakable mixture of pain and resolve in his gaze. He was bruised, humiliated, and forcibly kicked out. Yet something flickered in his eyes, a spark that hinted this story was far from over. After all, Keanu Reeves was no stranger to adversity, and he knew exactly how to turn a challenge into a moment of truth. The sun blazed overhead as Keanu Reeves limped slightly down the sidewalk. Though his face showed signs of pain, his mind was already racing. He had come to the dealership hoping for a respectful conversation about a classic car. Instead, he'd been assaulted, kicked out, and humiliated in front of multiple witnesses. He paused near a public bench, taking a moment to catch his breath. A trickle of blood marked his lower lip where it had split when he hit the ground. With a quiet sigh, he dabbed it gently with the edge of his jacket. A few passers-by paused to look, uncertain if they should approach. Keanu gave them a small, reassuring nod, signaling he was all right. What next? The rational side of him considered calling the police. Another part of him wanted to shrug it off and never set foot near that toxic place again. But as he replayed the scene in his mind, Langston's fury, the smugness of some staff, the absolute shock on others, he sensed there was a bigger issue at play than a single violent outburst. It felt like a culture of arrogance that needed to be addressed. As if on cue, a woman called out behind him, "Mr. Reeves!" Turning, he saw Eva, the younger salesperson who had tried to intervene at the dealership. She was breathless, having rushed out after him. Are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling with concern. Keanu nodded. "I'll be fine. Thank you for coming out here." Eva exhaled in relief. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "Mr. Langston, he's always been temperamental, but I've never seen him attack someone. People in there are in shock." He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder to reassure her. "I'm not angry at you or your coworkers. This was beyond any normal situation," he said, wincing slightly as he shifted his weight. "I appreciate you trying to stop him." Eva swallowed hard, guilt plain in her eyes. "I wish I could have done more. Look, the camera's inside. Some staff were filming too. Word is going to get out. Management might try to twist it, but the video will speak for itself." Keanu offered a small nod. "Truth has a way of finding daylight," he said, "but I have no intention of letting that place keep treating people so poorly. You know," he added, voice softening, "it wasn't just me who got hurt today. I saw how he treated you and the others too." Eva blinked back tears. "I don't know what will happen, Mr. Reeves. He's the manager. The owners trust him to keep the business exclusive, keep out people who don't belong." She used air quotes, disgust coloring her tone. Keanu thought for a moment, memories of the manager's hateful glare reigniting in his mind. Then he took a slow breath. "I won't let this slide," he said quietly. "Not just because of what happened to me. No one should have to work or shop under that kind of intimidation." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small notepad and pen. Simple items he often carried to jot down ideas. He scribbled a phone number. "If anyone in there needs to talk, or if you need help, have them call this number," he instructed, handing the slip of paper to Eva. "I know a few people who can shine a light on this in a more official way." Eva nodded, still trembling. "I will. Thank you," she breathed. "You're everything they say you are." Keanu smiled, albeit faintly. "I'm just a guy who tries to do the right thing," he replied. "Take care of yourself, Eva." She headed back toward the dealership, anxiety etched across her face. Keanu turned away, gingerly resuming his walk. Though battered physically, his determination only grew stronger. He could already anticipate the calls from the press once they got wind of the assault, the swirl of speculation on social media, and the swirl of camera flashes if paparazzi cornered him. But none of that mattered as much as fixing the deeper problem. 2 hours later, Keanu sat in a quiet office that overlooked a tranquil courtyard of bamboo plants. Across from him was one of his trusted friends and legal advisors, Marisol, who listened in disbelief as he recounted the morning's events. "He punched you and kicked you?" Marisol repeated, shock turning her normally steady demeanor into concern. "That's assault, Keanu." "I know," he said softly, sipping a glass of water. "But I don't want to just press charges and walk away. People like Langston thrive in places that value status over humanity. I'd like to see the entire culture of that dealership change, or at least be exposed." Marisol leaned back in her chair, studying Keanu with a thoughtful gaze. "So you want to help bring this story forward?" Keanu nodded, wincing as his bruised ribs protested the motion. "Yes, not to humiliate them, but to show that this kind of behavior isn't okay anywhere. That dealership is just one example of many places where people are judged by their looks or wealth." Outside the window, a light breeze rustled the bamboo leaves. It reminded Keanu of the calm he tried to maintain, even in the face of violence. He exhaled, thinking of Eva and the fear in her eyes. Marisol sighed, setting aside her notepad. "All right, let's gather any evidence and do this right. We'll make a statement about respect, about accountability." A faint smile curved on Keanu's face. Exactly. The day's events replayed in his mind. The cobalt blue vintage car, the humiliating assault, the silent crowd. But something new had taken shape, a resolve to stand up for those who couldn't, to bring empathy to a world that often preferred arrogance. Little did he know just how explosive the aftermath would be. Videos would surface, media would swarm, reputations would hang in the balance. The next steps Keanu took would set off a chain reaction that would shake the entire dealership, and possibly the high-end automotive world to its core. But this story is not over yet. What Keanu Reeves does next will stun everyone involved, from the manager who lashed out to the employees who felt powerless. Stay tuned for the next part, where the fallout of this shocking assault unfolds in ways no one could have predicted.